did once. Okay, when he warns clean up your act, he means it. When industry or the government doesn't pay heed, he sues them. He's the son of the late Robert F. Kennedy and Ethel Kennedy, and like his family before him, he's determined to make a difference in the world, and he already has. He's a no-nonsense proponent of environmental law. He's done a lot for the water here in New York, and I see him out there marching around the reservoir from time to time. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. Bobby, why the environmental law? Why'd you go into that field?
You know that I was always interested in the environment from when I was a baby. I mean, I had racing pigeons by the time I was 7. I've been training hawks since I was 11 years old.
You're a master falconer, I read.
Yeah.
When you and I were in Africa in '73, I think.
I caught a hawk over there.
You did catch a hawk, I think, yeah. And
an auger buzzard.
That's what it was, yeah. Okay. And you had it in the room for a couple. I went over to your room at the hotel there in, where were we?
Roger and I spent 6 weeks in a tent together.
That's right. We spent 6 weeks, and people don't realize
I've been trying to live that down for the last
You
30
took a lot of
years.
heat for that, I think. You never spoke.
Well, when Willie Horton raised his head, people were saying,
how did Bobby get involved with the guy? You know, that was I never had anything to do with that. That was proven.
Really? You took the rap for it.
I did. I took the heat, but I really never did. But at any rate, what was interesting, we did spend, 1973, I think, we spent time over there in Africa, and you captured this bird. I don't know whether it was a falcon or...
It was an auger buzzard.
Was it? It was a buzzard.
Just like the American red-tailed hawk.
Okay, and I'd come to your room in the hotel, and this thing would be sitting on your arm, and you'd be staring at it for a long time. Is there some trick to staring at these birds? What are you, hypnotizing it? Or?
Trying to get them to eat off my fist, and that's one of the initial steps in training them.
Oh, if they do that, then they start to tame or something?
Right.
But we took it out, and you let it fly away. I remember.
Right.
Yeah. We were there with a great man who was a great friend of yours, Lemoyne Billings, who passed away, I guess a few years ago. I saw him
81.
Yeah.
And in fact, I went to visit his grave this week out in this was his birthday was May 15th.
Lemoyne Billings was a good friend of your Uncle John's.
Right, he was President Kennedy's best friend, and then he was among my father's best friends after President Kennedy
and
was killed.
He sort of became your guardian, didn't he, for a while?
Yeah.
He kind of raised you, I think.
He was almost a surrogate father to me.
Right. Wonderful guy, and we had some great nights sitting around the campfire over in Africa, Lem and I hitting a little scotch and talking about your great future, and here you are, all these years later. When did your life turn around and you decide, okay, I'm going to go for this environmental law thing, I'm really going to make a difference? When did you?
In 84, 1980, end of 83, I was kind of reevaluating my life, and you know, I kind of made a career choice after my father died, because which happened when I was 14, and I had wanted to. Prior to that, I'd always wanted to be a veterinarian. But I think I felt some pressure for a variety of reasons to sort of change my career to try to do more of the kind of thing that he was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I ended up, rather than going to veterinary school, going to law school, and really followed his career path. I went to Harvard and then to University of Virginia, which he had done. And then I became an attorney and a prosecutor, which was kind of what my father had been doing. In 1984, I went through a lot of personal difficulties, and I really reassessed my life and said,
that was a drug time that people knew about, and I was proud of you because I saw you go through that, and I thought, boy, a lot of people don't turn it around. How did you turn it around?
I did what I was supposed to do, and I've been sober now for 12 years, and at that time I was reevaluating my life. And I just decided to do what I wanted to do, which had always been the environment. And I integrated a lot of the stuff that I had learned with law school into my initial interest in the environment.
When you talk about the environment, everybody I know thinks he's an environmentalist. I mean, the Republicans, Democrats, they all will say they're environmentalists. And there's obviously a line that you can cross where you become so concerned about I mean, Al Gore wrote in his book that the cars are the most dangerous thing on the planet. I mean, maybe they are, but nobody's going to give them up. So where do you get to be a legitimate environmentalist, and where do you get over too far?
Well, my view is that that we're not protecting the environment for nature's sake. We're protecting it for the sake of humanity. We're not protecting those northern forests for the sake of a spotted owl. We're protecting those forests because we believe they have more value to humanity standing than they would have where they cut down. The environment enriches us. It enriches us not just economically, although it's the basis for our economy, but enriches us spiritually and culturally and a lot of other ways that are difficult to quantify. And that's really where you get into trouble, because there's a strong drive in our society to not think about the future, to use up resources right now. Good environmental policy, 100% of the time, is good economic policy. If we want to measure the economy on how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs for generation after generation, in other words, sustainably. If, on the other hand, you want
to take a break, Bobby. Sorry. Excuse me. They're going to make a hard break here, and I want to come back. We'll pick it up right there with Bobby Kennedy, Jr.
You know, what's interesting is, ask those environmentalists, would they prefer that those toxic wastes go into the air and you breathe them? Would they prefer that you breathe them or the fish eat them?
What's he saying?
I don't know what he's saying.
Out of context. I mean, but basically, what he's saying is that you got to put the toxic material someplace.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, if you're creating toxic material, you got to put it someplace. If the fish eat them, they're going to go into human beings. I don't think that. I mean, I think that's the point Rachel Carson was making. They were spraying the DDT on to try to get the fire ants or the gypsy moths, but it was getting into the food chain, and it was bioaccumulating, and it was getting into us. We're not worried whether the striped bass in the Hudson River have PCBs in them. We're worried that those PCBs are going to get into children, and that's that's what I'm saying is that the environmentalists are not. I think most environmentalists are not out there saying that humans are, or that animals or nature are more valuable than humans. They're saying we need them to survive. They enrich us. They enrich us in all these different ways. And what we're fighting against is this impulse that says we're going to treat the planet as if it were a business in liquidation. We're going to convert all of our natural resources to cash. We're going to have a few years of pollution-based prosperity, and we're going to generate this illusion of a lot of cash and a lot of prosperity. But in the long run, we're going to have to pay for that with denuded environments, with toxic cleanup costs that we simply can't afford, and with economies that can't be revived. If you want to look at what would happen to nations, to our country, if we didn't invest in the environment, look at the nations that didn't do it in 1970. We started in 1970 investing in environmental infrastructure. Russia didn't do that. China didn't do that. Eastern Europe didn't do it. Mexico didn't do it. And now you have in those nations, you have environmental catastrophes that have matured into economic catastrophes. And there's entire regions of those nations that simply cannot be regenerated economically. They are write-offs. And what we're saying is we have a duty to prosper. Every generation has a duty to use the resources that God gave us to prosper. But we don't have the right to use resources that belong to the next generation. We have to maintain their choices intact for that generation. We can live off the interest, but don't go into the capital. Don't construct an economy that is based upon the theory that you can sell the farm piece by piece in order to pay for the groceries. We want the farm intact, and we want that to be moved down to the next generation. And every environmental issue that you can think of is about that. It's about sustainability.
Why are they considered? I mean, there are extremists at both ends, though, aren't there, Bobby?
Yeah, there's extremists at both ends, but there's also a tendency by, for example, the people who wrote the Contract for America to employ an old debating trick, which is to mischaracterize your opponent's argument and then react to the mischaracterization. And that is a lot of what I see going on in Capitol Hill. I mean, people are saying, well, we can't have environmental protection because environmentalists put animals before people. And that's not what's going on. Or they tell some anecdote about somebody.
Didn't the spotted owl put a lot of people out of work?
Well, but why were people? Why? First of all, that is an exaggation.
Okay, I just asked.
Well, let me answer that in two ways. One is the amount of people that were put out of work is exaggerated. What happened during the 1980s? More logs were cut in Washington and Oregon than at any time in history. and yet they lost 30% of their job base.
But isn't
and the
it true
reason
we
they
have more
did that,
trees in America today than we've ever had?
we don't have more old growth. We've got about 5% of the original old growth that we had in this country. Of course, other trees have regenerated, but those don't have the kind of biological diversity that we have in the Pacific Northwest. So the question is, did we lose jobs because of the spotted owl? We lost some jobs, but we lost very few. The vast amount of jobs that have been lost in the Pacific Northwest have been lost to automation, and because the resource is simply running out, and because we're exporting a lot of those logs overseas. Half of the Tongass National Forest, which is our biggest national forest, is being cut by Alaska Pulp and Paper, which is 100% Japanese owned, and those logs are being shipped over and milled over in Japan, and all the value added kind of job producing activities are taking place over there. The other answer to that question is, the battle over the spotted owl was a symbolic one. We used the spotted owl because we wanted to save those forests. We weren't saving those forests for the sake of a spotted owl, but the spotted owl was the only hook that the environmentalists had in order to preserve a publicly owned resource. And I remember,
but
these
didn't we find
logs,
out the owls will live anywhere? After all this protection, they found out they didn't know one tree from the other.
well, that's not true. I mean, they need old growth.
We've got 15
because,
seconds to a break here, but go ahead and wrap up.
well, they need the old growth, but the point is, we weren't preserving that old growth forest for the sake of the spotted owl. We're preserving the old growth forest for its own sake and using the spotted owl as a tool.
If you have any doubts about his interest in the environment, you're going to see when we come back after this message a clip from a film we did together 20 years ago. Stay with us. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 1973, I think. What were you, 19 or 20, I guess?
Yeah.
Going to Harvard.
The guy beat me pretty bad.
He did kind of take off on you there, didn't he? I thought you were pretty fast, and the guy was sort of pacing you, and then boom. The other thing is that rhinoceros is a trick that the Maasai warriors do. When they're sleeping rhinoceros, they get around and put the stone on them.
Right.
What people couldn't see right out of that scene is that you almost killed me that day, because I was with the film crew right behind you trying to get that shot. And when that rhinoceros got up and started running, you turned around and ran right over top of about 4 guys,
It's
including
that thing
me.
about, you can't outrun a rhinoceros, but I could run faster than you.
Yeah, well, in those days, I don't know. In those days, it would have been close, but it's changed a little. Tell me about the New York water supply in a minute, because we only got a few minutes left. I've got several questions I want to ask you, but I know you've been struggling about something wrong with the New York water supply. When we hear about it, we hear New York has the best water in the world. Why fool with it?
Yeah, New York has historically had some of the best drinking water on earth. It's won taste tests. It's bottled and sold in other cities. It accounts for the incomparable taste of New York City pizza and bagels. It's why they can't be reproduced anywhere. But the water is now in jeopardy. A third of the water is now borderline quality. It has a lot of sewage going into it. The water that goes to some neighborhoods, Harlem, the South Bronx, Lower East Side, Hell's Kitchen, and the Upper East Side, during the driest months is about 3% sewage effluent. It would be illegal to put sewage into drinking water reservoirs in any other state. New York is the only state that allows that, and now we have about 112 sewer plants that are discharging into the drinking water. The water violates federal standards during the summer. The Croton system has to be shut down. And the city now is faced with the prospect of either protecting the water supply or building a filter plant that will remove the pollutants. The filter plant will be a waste of money. It'll cost $8 billion to construct, $300 million a year to operate. It will destroy New York City economically. And what we're saying is, rather than investing that money in December of 1996, $8 billion, invest somewhere around $1 billion today to permanently protect the water supply from pollution.
How do you permanently protect it quickly?
You need to buy some land around the reservoirs from willing sellers without using condemnation, so it's something that people will accept upstate. You need to promulgate strong regulations that will stop the sewage discharges into the drinking water and stop other inputs of pollutants into the water.
Bobby, when are you going to run for office? Everybody wants to know it. I have to ask it. I've known you a long time. Frankly, I had my doubts about you 20 years ago, but you've grown up a lot.
I had my doubts about you too, Roger.
I know. You still do.
Well, I don't know. Will you run my campaign?
Well, I promised Lem Billings. You know, Lem and I got a little drunk one night at campfire, and he said, I want you to keep an eye on Bobby for me. And I said, don't worry. If he needs anything, I'll be there, so I might have to help you.
Yeah. Well, I'll call you in.
Have you
No,
thought
I don't know.
about it?
I really, yeah, I thought about it. And I really live my life one day at a time. And you know, right now I love what I'm doing. It's fulfilling to me, and I'm just going to keep doing that until until the signs are right. If all of a sudden something occurred to me that I was supposed to do this, I would. But I really try to do what I'm supposed to do, and do that one day at a time.
Are you liberal on most issues, or are you conservative on some?
I wouldn't characterize myself with either of those labels. I'm kind of libertarian in some areas. I believe in free market economies. I believe if we had a true free market economy where we eliminated subsidies to people, we would not have the kind of environmental pollution problems that we have. So I think I come from that perspective, which is not, but at the same time, I believe that we live in a diverse society, and I think diversity is wonderful in every way. And so I guess that's kind of a liberal point of view.
Have you come to terms with the Kennedy legacy, the pressure, or the greatness of the Kennedy legacy must have been a pressure on all the children, and I'm sure you went through a time saying, gee, can I do it? Can I live up to it? Should I do it? Have you come to terms with that, or are you still struggling with it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I recognize I think I've got a good sense of who I am, and that I'm very proud of my father, of my uncles, and the other members of my family, but I don't feel competitive with them. And I love what I'm doing. I love what the gifts that I've been given, and I feel like I want to use those in whatever way that I'm supposed to, but that I don't have to do that against another backdrop of something that my father did with his gifts.
I lost my dad a few years ago, and I've always wanted to say a few things to him. If you could say something to your dad today, what would it be?
I'd tell him thanks for all that he gave me, and thanks for sticking with his own values to the end, and putting his principles ahead of his self-interest, because I think that's a wonderful example for me, and it's something that I'd like to leave with my children.
Bobby?
Roger?
Great to see you again.
Good to see you.
Okay.
I'm glad you're out of politics.
I was too tough for you guys. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.